Your daughter is a danger to herself and others. Those were the words my brother Marcus said to my parents while I stood frozen in the hallway, listening through the crack in the study door. He was showing them something on his phone, texts, screenshots, evidence of a person I didn't recognize. A person who didn't exist. What none of them knew was that I was recording everything. And what I captured that night would eventually put my brother in federal prison and expose the darkest lie our family had ever told. But before I tell you how I destroyed the man who tried to erase me, you need to understand how a loving sister becomes a ghost in her own family, and how a single therapy session changed everything. My name is Vivian Hartley, and for 34 years, I believed I was the problem. Growing up in Westchester County, New York, my family looked perfect from the outside. My father, William Hartley, was a retired investment banker who had built a small fortune in commercial real estate. My mother, Eleanor, was the kind of woman who color-coordinated her holiday decorations and never let anyone see her without lipstick. And then there was Marcus, my older brother by 3 years, the golden child who could do no wrong. I was the quiet one. The anxious one. The daughter who needed extra support. When I was 12, I had my first panic attack during a school presentation. Marcus told everyone at dinner that I had freaked out and embarrassed the family name. My parents sent me to therapy, but not because they wanted to help me. They sent me because they wanted to fix the broken piece of their otherwise perfect puzzle. For years, I internalized their narrative. I was fragile. I was unstable. I was lucky my family tolerated me. But here's what they didn't know: I wasn't fragile. I was being systematically undermined by the one person who was supposed to protect me. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 years ago, right after my father's heart attack. He survived, but the brush with mortality made my parents suddenly obsessed with estate planning. For the first time, they sat Marcus and me down and explained the family trust. Everything will be split evenly, my father said, looking at both of us. 50-50. You're both my children, and I love you equally. I remember Marcus's face in that moment. He smiled at me, warm and brotherly. But his eyes were cold. Calculating. He squeezed my hand under the table and said, "That's so generous, Dad. Vivian and I will take good care of everything." That night, I went to bed feeling something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Maybe my parents did love me after all. Maybe the inheritance was their way of finally acknowledging that I mattered. I was so naive. The gaslighting started slowly, so slowly that I didn't even notice at first. A few weeks after the estate meeting, my mother called me, her voice tight with concern. "Vivian, Marcus showed me a text you sent him last night. I'm worried about you." "What text?" I asked, genuinely confused. "The one where you said you were thinking about hurting yourself. Honey, if you're struggling, we can get you help." My blood ran cold. "Mom, I never sent that. I don't know what you're talking about." There was a long pause. Then my mother sighed, that familiar sigh of disappointment I'd heard my whole life. "Vivian, please don't lie to me. I saw the screenshot. It came from your number." I pulled up my phone, scrolling frantically through my messages to Marcus. Nothing. No texts from the previous night. No conversation about hurting myself. Nothing at all. "Mom, I swear to you, I didn't send anything. Someone must have faked it." "Honey," she said, and her voice was heavy with pity, "this is exactly what Dr. Feldman warned us about. Denial is a symptom." Dr. Feldman was the psychiatrist my parents had sent me to when I was 16, the one who had prescribed me medication I didn't need for a condition I didn't have. I hadn't seen him in over a decade, but apparently, my family still treated his decade-old diagnosis like gospel. I hung up the phone shaking. Something was very, very wrong. Over the next 2 years, my reality unraveled piece by piece. Marcus showed my parents emails I never wrote, angry, unhinged messages accusing them of favoritism and threatening to make them pay. He played them voicemails I never left, tearful, rambling recordings where I sobbed about hearing voices and wanting to disappear. He documented incidents that never happened. He told them I had shown up at his office screaming at his secretary. His secretary, a woman I had never met, apparently confirmed the story. He said I had keyed his car in the parking lot of a restaurant where we had dinner. He even produced security footage, grainy and distant, showing a woman in a coat similar to mine scratching the paint with her keys. But it wasn't me. It was never me. Every time I denied it, my parents looked at me with that same expression, pity mixed with exhaustion, like I was a burden they had carried too long. "Vivian," my father said during one particularly brutal family meeting, "we love you, but we can't keep pretending everything is fine. Marcus has shown us the evidence. We've seen it with our own eyes. You need serious help. Dad, I'm telling you, none of this is real. I didn't do any of those things. Someone is setting me up." Marcus leaned forward, his face a mask of concern. "Viv, I know this is hard to hear, but this is exactly what the doctors said would happen. Paranoid delusions. Conspiracy thinking. It's a symptom of your condition. I don't have a condition. I screamed. My mother flinched. My father shook his head. And Marcus just looked at me with sad, sympathetic eyes. We're going to get you the help you need, he said softly. Even if you can't see it right now, we're doing this because we love you. That night, my parents changed their will. I found out about the disinheritance 6 months later, 3 weeks before my mother died. She had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in February, stage 4, inoperable. The doctors gave her 2 months, and she used every remaining day to put her affairs in order. One of those affairs, apparently, was ensuring that her unstable daughter wouldn't destroy the family legacy. I visited her in the hospital, hoping that facing mortality might make her see the truth. Instead, she handed me a letter. I want you to understand why we made this decision, she said, her voice weak but clear. Your father and I love you, Vivian. We always have. But we can't in good conscience leave you money that you'll use to hurt yourself. Marcus has agreed to be your conservator. He'll make sure you're taken care of. I opened the letter with trembling hands. It was a summary of the new estate plan. Everything, the properties, the investments, the jewelry, all $8.7 million, would go to Marcus. I would receive a monthly stipend of $2,000, managed by my brother, for as long as I demonstrated stability. I was being written off like a liability. Mom, I whispered, tears streaming down my face, I'm not crazy. I swear to you, I'm not crazy. She reached out and touched my cheek, and for a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Doubt? Regret? But then it was gone. I know you believe that, sweetheart. I know you do. She died 11 days later. And just like that, I lost my mother and my inheritance in the same breath. The grief nearly destroyed me, but it was the injustice that kept me alive. I knew I wasn't insane. I knew I hadn't sent those texts or made those calls or done any of the things Marcus claimed. But I had no way to prove it. Every time I tried to access the evidence my brother had shown my parents, he deflected. The screenshots were on his old phone. The voicemails had been deleted after my parents heard them. The security footage was archived somewhere he couldn't access. Convenient. Always so convenient. I started seeing a new therapist, Dr. Mariana Okonkwo, a forensic psychologist who specialized in family trauma. I didn't tell her about the inheritance at first. I just needed someone to believe me. For 3 months, I sat in her office every Tuesday afternoon and told her everything. The texts. The emails. The voicemails. The security footage. The slow, systematic dismantling of my credibility. Dr. Okonkwo listened without judgment. She asked questions. She took notes. And then, one afternoon, she said 5 words that changed everything: these files have been edited. I stared at her. What? She turned her laptop toward me. On the screen was a zoomed-in image of one of the screenshots Marcus had shown my parents, a text message thread where I had written terrible things about wanting to hurt myself. Look at the metadata, she said, pointing to a string of numbers at the bottom of the image. This screenshot wasn't taken from an iPhone message thread. It was created in photo editing software. The timestamp on the file shows it was made 6 days after the conversation allegedly took place. My heart stopped. How did you get this? I requested copies from your father's estate attorney during the conservatorship evaluation. They were required to provide all evidence used to justify the arrangement. She scrolled to another image. This voicemail? The audio file has been spliced. Someone took recordings of your voice from multiple sources and edited them together. I can hear the cuts. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. For 2 years, I had been telling everyone the evidence was fake, and everyone had looked at me like I was delusional. And now I had proof. Dr. Okonkwo didn't just validate my suspicions, she helped me build a case. Over the next 4 months, we assembled a team. A digital forensics expert who could prove the screenshots were fabricated. An audio analyst who could demonstrate the voicemails were edited. A private investigator who discovered that the secretary Marcus claimed I had screamed at was actually his girlfriend Tess' cousin, a woman who had been paid $5,000 to lie. The security footage of me keying his car? The investigator found the original, unedited version. The woman in the coat wasn't me. It was Marcus's girlfriend, wearing a wig and a jacket she bought at the same store where I purchased mine 3 years earlier. They had planned everything. But the most damning evidence came from Marcus himself. My investigator discovered that my brother had been having an affair with a woman named Danielle for nearly 4 years. Danielle, it turned out, had a very expensive lifestyle, a lifestyle Marcus couldn't afford on his own salary. So he had been siphoning money from our parents for years, telling them he needed loans for business ventures that didn't exist. When my parents announced the equal inheritance split, Marcus panicked. If I received my half of the estate, he wouldn't be able to cover his tracks. His debts would be exposed. His affair would be exposed. everything would fall apart. So he decided to eliminate me, not physically, but legally. He would convince my parents I was mentally unfit, have himself named my conservator, and gain control of the entire $8.7 million fortune. It was fraud. It was elder abuse. And it was about to be his undoing. I confronted Marcus at my father's house exactly 1 year after our mother's death. My father was still alive then, though his health was declining. He had been living alone in the Westchester estate, attended by a nurse Marcus had hired, a nurse who, I later discovered, had been instructed to limit my visits and report back everything I said. I didn't call ahead. I didn't warn anyone. I simply drove up to the house on a Sunday morning with Dr. Okonkwo, my attorney, and 2 witnesses. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, but my mind was crystal clear. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't the scared little sister anymore. I was a woman with the truth on her side. The security code to the gate hadn't been changed, Marcus's one oversight. The iron gate swung open, and I drove up the familiar winding driveway lined with oak trees my grandfather had planted 60 years ago. Every inch of this property held memories, and Marcus had tried to steal all of it. Marcus was there, of course. He was always there now, hovering over our father like a vulture waiting for the last breath. I could see his BMW parked in the circular driveway, polished and gleaming in the morning sun. The car he had bought with money stolen from our parents. When I walked into the living room, he looked up with that familiar expression of false concern. His face went through 3 emotions in rapid succession: surprise, then fear, then that practiced mask of brotherly worry he had perfected over the years. "Vivian, you can't just show up here unannounced. Dad needs rest. You know how much stress you cause him." He stood up, positioning himself between me and our father, as if I were the threat. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." I ignored him. I walked straight past him, close enough to smell his expensive cologne, the same scent he'd worn to our mother's funeral, to my father, who was sitting in his wheelchair by the window, looking frail and confused. He had aged 10 years in the 12 months since Mom died. His hands trembled constantly now, and his eyes had that cloudy, uncertain look of a man who had lost his anchor. "Dad," I said, kneeling beside him and taking his hands in mine, "I need you to listen to me. Everything Marcus told you about me was a lie. I can prove it." My father looked at me with rheumy eyes. I could see him trying to process my words, trying to reconcile the daughter in front of him with the monster Marcus had painted. "Vivian, sweetheart, we've been through this." "No, Dad. This time is different. This time I have evidence." Marcus laughed, a sharp, nervous sound. "Dad, don't listen to her. This is exactly what I warned you about. The paranoid delusions, the conspiracy theories." "Marcus," my attorney said, stepping forward, "I'd advise you to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you." The color drained from my brother's face. For the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. I nodded to Dr. Okonkwo, who opened her laptop and began playing the files. The original screenshots, side by side with Marcus's fabricated versions. The spliced voicemail, with the cuts highlighted by audio software. The security footage showing Marcus's girlfriend, not me, vandalizing the car. The financial records proving Marcus had stolen over $340,000 from my parents over 6 years. My father watched in silence. His face went pale. His hands trembled. And Marcus started to sweat. "This is ridiculous," he said, his voice rising. "Vivian fabricated all of this. She's been planning this for years. This is exactly the kind of paranoid scheme I warned you about." "Marcus," my attorney said calmly, "we've already provided copies of this evidence to the FBI. A forensic team has verified every file. Your digital fingerprints are all over the fabricated documents." The room went silent. My father turned to look at his son, his golden boy, his pride and joy, and I watched something shatter behind his eyes. "Marcus," he whispered. "Tell me this isn't true." Marcus opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. And then he ran. He didn't get far. Federal agents arrested Marcus at JFK Airport 4 hours later. He was trying to board a flight to Costa Rica with $180,000 in cash and a passport under a different name. The charges were extensive: wire fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, falsifying evidence, and conspiracy to commit financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. His girlfriend Danielle was arrested 2 days later as a co-conspirator. The trial lasted 3 weeks, and I attended every single day. I sat in the front row of that federal courthouse, watching my brother try to lie his way out of a prison sentence. His defense attorney was expensive, paid for with money Marcus had hidden in offshore accounts, and he threw everything at the wall. He argued that I had entrapped Marcus, that I had manipulated the evidence, that I was the real villain in this story. He even tried to use my history of anxiety against me, calling a psychiatrist who testified that people with my condition often engage in elaborate schemes for attention. But our evidence was bulletproof. The digital forensics expert explained, in terms even the most tech-illiterate juror could understand, exactly how Marcus had fabricated those screenshots. The audio analyst played the spliced voicemails side by side with recordings of my actual voice, pointing out every cut and edit. The private investigator testified about the $5,000 payment to the fake secretary, producing bank records and text messages that proved the conspiracy. And then Dr. Okonkwo took the stand. She spent 2 hours walking the jury through every psychological evaluation she had conducted on me. She explained that I showed no signs of the disorders Marcus had claimed I suffered from. She presented her credentials, 20 years of forensic psychology experience, testimony in over 100 cases, and she looked directly at the jury when she delivered her conclusion. Vivian Hartley is not mentally ill, she said. She is the victim of a calculated, deliberate campaign of psychological abuse designed to discredit her and steal her inheritance. What her brother did to her has a name. It's called gaslighting. And it nearly destroyed her. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned with their verdict, Marcus was standing at the defense table in his expensive suit, still wearing that mask of false innocence. I watched his face as the foreperson read the verdicts. Guilty. 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 On every single count. Marcus collapsed into his chair. His attorney put a hand on his shoulder. And I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just sat there, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, peace. The judge sentenced Marcus to 12 years in federal prison. Danielle received 8 years as a co-conspirator. The secretary, who had lied about me screaming at her, pleaded guilty to perjury. And received 2 years of probation and a permanent mark on her record that would follow her forever. My father changed his will again before he died 8 months later. This time, he wrote me a letter too, not to explain why I was being disinherited, but to apologize for ever doubting me. I spent 2 years believing the worst about you, he wrote, his handwriting shaky with age and illness. I let your brother poison me against my own daughter. I will never forgive myself for that. I can only hope that you'll forgive me. I did forgive him. Not because he deserved it, but because holding on to that anger would have given Marcus one final victory. When the estate was finally settled, I received my full inheritance, $4.35 million, exactly half of what remained after legal fees and Marcus's theft. I used part of it to establish a foundation for victims of family financial abuse. I named it after Dr. Okonkwo, the woman who believed me when no one else would. People sometimes ask me if I miss my brother. If I grieve the relationship we never had. If I feel guilty about what happened to him. The honest answer is no. Not anymore. For a while, I did feel guilty. I would lie awake at night wondering if I could have done something differently, if there was some way to have saved both my inheritance and my relationship with Marcus. I spent months in therapy working through those feelings, unpacking the decades of conditioning that had taught me to prioritize his needs over my own. But here's what I finally understood: I didn't send Marcus to prison. He sent himself. Every lie he told, every document he forged, every person he bribed, those were his choices. He could have accepted his half of the inheritance and lived a comfortable life. Instead, he chose greed. He chose cruelty. He chose to destroy his own sister for money. I don't miss Marcus. I miss the brother I thought I had, the one who squeezed my hand under the table and promised we'd take care of our family together. But that person never existed. He was a mask worn by a predator, a performance designed to make me trust the man who was actively destroying me. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Dr. Okonkwo hadn't noticed those edited files. I would have lost everything: my inheritance, my reputation, possibly my freedom. Marcus was already laying the groundwork to have me institutionalized. I found drafts of commitment petitions on his computer during the investigation, documents describing me as a danger to herself and others who requires immediate involuntary treatment. He wasn't just going to take my money. He was going to take my life. My therapist says healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering clearly and choosing to move forward anyway. It's about building a new life on the ashes of the old one, brick by brick, day by day. So that's what I'm doing. Moving forward. I have a new life now. A small house in Vermont, far from Westchester and its ghosts. A garden where I grow tomatoes and lavender and sunflowers that reach toward the sky like they trying to touch the sun. A cat named Biscuit who sleeps on my feet every night and purrs when I come home. Friends who know my real story and love me anyway. And I have clarity, the clarity that comes from knowing who you are, even when everyone around you insists you're someone else. Last month, I received a letter from Marcus. It was the first communication I'd had from him since the trial. The envelope was stamped with the return address of the federal correctional facility where he's serving his sentence. I held that letter in my hands for a long time, feeling its weight. Part of me wanted to open it, to see what he had to say after everything he had done. Was he apologizing? Making excuses? Asking for forgiveness? In the end, I burned it without reading a single word. Some people don't deserve closure. Some bridges need to stay burned. For 2 years, my brother tried to convince the world I was crazy. He fabricated evidence, manipulated my parents, and stole my inheritance. He tried to gaslight me into oblivion, to erase me from my own family, to turn everyone I loved against me. But he made one fatal mistake. He underestimated the quiet sister. The anxious one. The one everyone thought was fragile. The one who had spent her whole life being told she was broken. Turns out, I was the strongest person in the room. And now he has 12 years in a federal cell to think about that. 12 years to remember the sister he betrayed. 12 years to understand that the person he dismissed as weak and crazy was the one who brought him down. I hope he thinks about it every single day. Because I've stopped thinking about him. I have better things to do, like living my life, building my foundation, and helping other victims of family abuse find the justice I almost didn't get. My name is Vivian Hartley. I am not crazy. I never was. And I am finally, completely, utterly free. Lesson from this story. The people who call you crazy are often the ones with the most to hide. Never stop fighting for your truth, because the evidence that saves you might be one conversation away.